Professor A.M. Agarwal, Professor Mohan Singh, Mr. Gaurav Gulati, Dr. Chetan Vyas, distinguished academicians, members of the faculty, last but not the least, my dear students. When I was requested to come here, I was in a bit of a problem trying to schedule this program. But when I found that it was in memory of Justice Fatima Bibi, I said I must come. I felt it was my duty because she was a pioneer. I congratulate the university authorities for organizing the memorial lecture series in memory of Justice Fatima Bibi. Thanks to social media today, you get to know a lot about the latest generation of judges. But so far as Justice Fatima Bibi is concerned, except that she belonged to the judicial service and she was a judge of the Kerala High Court a few months after retirement, 2 or 3 months after retirement. She was appointed as the first woman judge of the Supreme Court when Fatima Bibi was appointed judge of the Supreme Court. I was a child in the legal profession, only 4 years old, because I was enrolled only on 5th July 1985. In 1990, there was a matter going on in the Supreme Court for which I had to visit the Supreme Court at least 10 times. And every time, either before my matter was called on or after the matter was over, I would go to the court where the court of Justice Fatima Bibi. She had also been recently elevated, so she was generally the junior partner on the bench at that time. But what I noticed about her was her courtesy and her extreme humility, which was there right till the end. It was at that stage itself when I wondered that we have a people-centric constitution in our country. All you youngsters, law students, you must have been reading the Constitution of India, which was adopted on 28 to 89. She was appointed exactly 40 years after the Constitution was adopted, 26th January 1950. Most of the provisions came into force 28th January 1950. The Supreme Court of India was established. Our people-centric constitution says, we, the people of India, constitute India into a sovereign democratic republic, to which the words socialist and secular have been added by the 42nd Amendment. And what does the Constitution promise? It promises to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, political, liberty, of thoughts, expression, belief, faith, and worship. And to provide integrity were also added by the 42nd Amendment. Summarizes the vision of our Constitution, the values, the objects of our noble Constitution. What does social justice mean? That all social groups should be treated equally. We have the fundamental rights. The preamble in itself may not be justiciable, but after the Keshavananda Bharati case, it has been judicially established by the Supreme Court that the preamble is very much part of the Constitution. The Keshavananda Bharati case also introduced the concept of basic features of the Constitution, the basic structure which was not amendable. You young students must be aware that before the 44th Amendment Act, right to property was a fundamental right. And the right to compensation was also a fundamental right. At the same time, the government, the state had a commitment. Though the word socialist was introduced much later, the word secular was introduced much later. These are features which have existed in our Constitution. It was necessary for the government to acquire land for development purposes as the nation was young, for equitable distribution. When land was taken, there was dispute with regard to compensation which was paid. In the early days, the judgments of the Supreme Court held in favor of payment of market value, and there were amendments to the Constitution itself. These amendments were challenged on the ground that chapter of legislature shall not enact any law which takes away or infringes the fundamental rights. So these amendments were challenged, and the challenge did not succeed because the Supreme Court held that constitutional amendment under Article 368 of the Constitution of India would not be equated to enactment of an ordinary law under Article 13, sub-Article 2. But earlier in the case of Sajjan Singh, two judges of the Supreme Court took a slightly different view. They questioned the correctness of the earlier judgment. And then came the case of Golaknath, when Supreme Court said that the fundamental rights would not at all be amended. The case was again reopened. In the Keshavananda Bharati case, this time the Supreme Court held by majority that fundamental rights could be amended, but there were certain basic features of the Constitution. And these basic features, the basic structure, would not be amended. Subsequent judgments have found that the principles which are there in the preamble, they all constitute basic features of the Constitution, which cannot be taken away, which cannot be abrogated. Though the preamble in itself is not justiciable, you have the fundamental rights which are very much justiciable, which provides for complete equality irrespective of gender. There are provisions for reservation, but the Constitution frowns upon any kind of people-centric, woman-friendly Constitution. Why is it that Fatima Bibi was the first to be appointed a judge of the Supreme Court in the year 1989? Why is it that 30 years, there were many others appointed as High Court judges before her and after her. But almost 13 years after she was appointed, I was elevated as a judge of the High Court. And at the time of my elevation to the High Court, Justice Romapal had already been elevated to the Supreme Court about a year and a half or 2 years earlier. For 4.5 years, I was the only woman on the bench of Calcutta High Court. And then 4.5 years, another lady, Justice Indira Banerjee, joined the bench. Later, some more judges left. In 1977, 2 women were appointed on the same day, Justice Padma Kasturi and Justice Manjula Bose, sister of Siddharth Shankar Ray. Then, after about 6 months, 2 more ladies were appointed. Justice Fatima Bibi, who left any number of judgments on arbitration, and Justice Jyoti Naina. 12 years later, in 1990, Justice Romapal was appointed a judge of the High Court. So while there were 4 judges in 1978, and gradually they started retiring one after the other, there were no appointments for 12 years. It's okay. Actually, it's quite warm in here, but it's quite cold outside. Now, after Justice Pal, when Justice Pal was elevated to the Supreme Court in the end of 1999, she was the third only. After Justice Fatima Bibi, it was Justice Sujata Mohan. Then in the end of 1999 or perhaps 2000, beginning January 2000, Justice Pal was elevated to the Supreme Court as the third woman. And Mrs. Pal was elevated on 6th August 1990 to the High Court. I was elevated as the 6th one on 5th February 2002. How many men were appointed in between? Countless. Absolutely countless. Justice Romapal became the third judge of the Supreme Court, to be followed by Justice Gyanshudha Mishra as the fourth judge, Ranjana Desai, Justice Ranjana Desai as the fifth judge, then Justice Bhanumati from Tamil Nadu, who also rose from the services as the third, fourth, fifth, sixth judge. Justice Indu Malhotra, who was elevated directly from the bar as the seventh judge, and I was appointed as the eighth judge to the Supreme Court. Thankfully, after me, 3 judges were appointed on the same day, on 31st August 2021, and we became 4. I was absolutely thrilled, though it was only 4 out of 34. I still thought it was a big number. In my retirement speech, I had expressed the hope that I would be replaced by somebody else from the same gender. But unfortunately, over 2 years have elapsed. Another judge has retired, Justice Hima Kohli. During that time, Justice Hima Kohli, Justice Nagaratna, who fortunately will be a Chief Justice, though for a short while in 2027, and Justice Bela Trivedi. Possibly Justice Bela Trivedi also doesn't have too much time left. Why does this happen? In a country where you have complete equality, why this gender discrimination? I find that the memorial lecture series is basically on gender discrimination in employment laws. I am of the view that because of the Constitution and because of progressive judgments delivered by the Supreme Court for a very long time, from the Muthamma case, where an IAS officer, an officer of the Indian Foreign Service, IFS officer, had to resign. In the case of
Nargis Mirza also, Air India versus
the Air India,
Nargis Mirza. Air India versus Nargis Mirza's case.
Nargis Mirza, that's right. Nargis Mirza, where on first pregnancy, and air hostess had to resign. These rules were struck down as discriminatory, and many more. When we talk about gender discrimination, people only talk about discrimination between men and women, but they forget that there is a third gender which is much neglected. They too deserve equality. They have all the constitutional rights. It is most unfortunate that the majority of persons belong to this gender have to earn their living practically by extortion when a child is born, when they just turn up at the hospital or they turn up at the house, they demand a lot of money. What happens to our human rights? Yet, the Supreme Court didn't fall behind. Even there, in 2014, in the National Legal Services Authority case, the Supreme Court, in the Nalsa case, it was public interest litigation initiated by the Nalsa. You are probably aware that Article 39, capital A of the Constitution of India provides for equal justice for all. Now, one of the impediments to justice is the expense and the difficulty involved. Therefore, this provision was introduced, and in furtherance of Article 39A, Parliament enacted the Legal Services Authorities Act. Under the Legal Services Authorities Act, you have a National Legal Services Authority, which is usually chaired by the senior most judge of the Supreme Court after the Chief Justice of India. You have the Supreme Court Legal Services Committee, myself officiated as chairperson of the West Bengal Legal Services Authority for almost a year before my transfer to Delhi. And then I was the executive chairperson of the Delhi State Legal Services Authority, the patron of the Tamil Nadu State Legal Services Authority. You have the High Court Legal Services Committee. You have the District Legal Services Authorities. And you have legal services authorities even at the taluka, subdivision and taluka level. The Legal Services Authorities Act provides for free legal aid, legal assistance to underprivileged, marginalized persons, differently abled persons who are unable to approach the court to vindicate their rights or to defend themselves. Even women, irrespective of their income, are entitled to free legal aid. National Legal Services Authority initiated a public interest litigation in which the Supreme Court passed certain judicial orders for securing the rights of members of the transgender community. When the inaugural speech was being given, what was said was, what is required is sensitivity. In addition to knowledge of law. Knowledge of law you can acquire from the books. But sensitivity is something which grows within you. You have to develop this sensitivity. When I was in Tamil Nadu, I was introduced to a police officer who was a transgender. I administered oath to the first advocate from the transgender community. This constable was being awarded. She was being called up to the stage. I objected. I said, you don't highlight transgender by bringing her up to the stage, because it may cause her him or her some embarrassment. But yes, appoint more of them so that they intermingle into society and are given their rights. When I used to inaugurate new buildings, I used to invariably find very modern washroom facilities. Men, women, disabled, differently abled. What about the third gender? What about their humility? What about their embarrassment? So these are things we have to watch out, ensure that we secure not just equal justice for men and women, but also equal justice for the third gender by educating them, by training them, by giving them the opportunity to compete, and sometimes even giving them the benefit of reservation as elsewhere. Now, since this is a lecture series in memory of Fatima Bibi, who happened to be a woman, now let me go back to the woman. Women constitute almost 50% of the population in this world. They are the sacrificing mothers who bring the next generation. They are the doting grandmothers, the much loved daughters, the adored sisters. Some of them work, some of them do not work. They work at home. But amidst all the roles that women have, people seem to forget that women are individuals. They are individuals with the same rights, same aspirations, same feelings. It hurts them when you beat them. It emotionally hurts them when you insult them, when you discriminate against them. And one major area of discrimination, there are certain qualities which are attributed to a woman. I'm a little conservative. So it is, I support values. But my point of woman should be perfect. But so should man. But that duty is not of the woman alone. There should be some degree of joint parenting. Why have women fallen back? Before I come to that, I would just start off with a few quotations. In his book, Due Process of Law, Lord Denning wrote, a woman feels as keenly, thinks as clearly as a man. And I think now it has been proved beyond doubt. You have had Fatima Bibi and others following. You have very competent judges all over the country. I was absolutely thrilled when I was Chief Justice of Madras High Court. I used to very proudly say that I'm the captain of a cricket team, including a 12th woman in that team. The woman judge strength was the highest in the country at that point of time. But the judge strength was 75. So that difference was always there. She has as much right to her freedom to develop her personality to the full as a man. When she marries, she does not become the husband's servant, but his equal partner. If his work is more important in the life of the community, hers is more important in the life of the family, even if she's not working. My mother, she hardly worked. She was compelled to work for about 2 months. Because when my father got transferred to Mount Abu, and when they went to admit me, there was a shortage of teachers. So the nuns insisted that my mother, who was a graduate, should teach. So she taught for a few months and then gave up. But she definitely encouraged me to stand on my own feet, to achieve what I have achieved. Of course, she wanted me to be a doctor, so I should actually have been addressing you in this faculty as a doctor. But when it came to dissecting frogs during biology classes, I used to run away from there. And ultimately, I took up law. That too, with the idea of joining the civil services. As my father belonged to the Indian Police Service, I wouldn't say I was entirely a first generation lawyer. My grandfather was a public prosecutor in Burma before Burma fell during the Second World War. But I never saw my grandfather, nor did I see his books. And my father joined the Indian Police Service. She first encouraged me to be a doctor when she found that I was not inclined to become one. She encouraged me in my profession. In the early days, when I used to attend chamber, in Calcutta, lawyers worked till very late in the night. I could not afford to leave the chamber before 10:20. So I used to take the last public bus because I couldn't afford a car when I joined initially. I couldn't afford a car every day. My father had one, but once in a while I could use it. My mother used to stand in the bus stand and wait for me. And then the local pawn shop owner used to tell my mother, "Don't worry, auntie, we all know your daughter. Nothing will happen to her in this locality. You please rest assured at home." But she was a housewife. She gave me all the encouragement. And she was absolutely thrilled when I was elevated to the bench. She passed away in 2011. I was already a judge. My father didn't get the opportunity to see me as a judge. So Denning says neither can do without the other. Neither is above the other or under the other. They are equal. Now, to quote Swami Vivekananda, just as a bird cannot fly with one wing, the nation cannot march forward if the women are left behind. The right to equality, irrespective of gender, is a basic human right, recognized, reaffirmed, and reiterated in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations on 10th December 1948. Some of the relevant articles are Article 1, which says all human beings are born free and are equal in dignity and rights. Men, women, third gender, everyone. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Everyone is entitled to, Article 2, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration, without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Article 7, all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. Then you have a series of international covenants. For paucity of time, I will not refer to all of them. Some of the major instruments relating to women are the Convention on the Political Rights of Women, then the CEDAW, the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is often referred to as the Bill of Rights for Women. Then, of course, elimination of violence against women, so on and so forth. All this is there in our own constitution, in Articles 14 to 18, read with Article 19, read with Article 21 of the Constitution of India, which has been liberally and widely interpreted by the Supreme Court of India to include within its ambit all human rights. Because the Supreme Court says the right to live includes the right to live with dignity, not just a mere animal existence. So all the human rights, right to shelter, right to food, right to clean environment, right to health care, have been held by the Supreme Court to be part of the very valuable right under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Today, the Indian Constitution we prefer to. Most modern constitutions have equality provisions. Yet, systematic gender-based discrimination is not unique to any particular country. It is there almost all over the world. I attended an international conference on access to justice, and many foreign judges attended that conference, including ladies from courts in Canada. And one of the judges told me that very unfortunately, one of the lady judges of the highest court in Canada underwent a divorce, which was not attributable to her at all, because it was a clear case of infidelity on the part of the husband. But the comments which were made were, she's unwomanlike. If she doesn't go through a divorce, who would? She's aggressive, she's offensive, so on and so forth. But if it is the other way around, and a woman is constrained to leave, they will say she should have adjusted. She should have known that she's a woman. Managing the house depends on her. I am not against adjustment for 1 minute. Certainly, I was noticing the name of the university, United University, Unity. So, unity amongst the human race, unity amongst all Indians, irrespective of gender, irrespective of religion, irrespective of caste, creed, so on and so forth. My point is that adjustment, the quality to adjust, is a human quality which every human being should possess, man or woman. We hear of cases of violence against women. We also have to enact law on protection of women against violence, domestic violence. It is only a manifestation of discrimination, gender violence. A feeling that women perhaps are inferior. Women are subjected to different kinds of violence within the parental family. In the parental family, when it comes to education, except in advanced families, men are usually, the boys are given better education by and large. There are some. There is another widely prevalent form of discrimination against women. That is, though the laws have been made, the inheritance laws have been amended and made egalitarian. The practice of making big property belonging to parents is a widely prevalent practice in this country. There is discrimination in the matrimonial family, the broader community and elsewhere, which includes discrimination, inferiority of status vis-a-vis men, little decision-making power. So although more and more women are working now with Article 14 and Article 16, how many women are really making it to the top at the decision making level? Very few. In 2027, we will only have the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India. When I joined Madras High Court had a history of 155 years of glorious existence. I was only the second Chief Justice. The first being Kanta Kumari Bhatnagar, who was Chief Justice in 1992 for a few months, for about 4 months. Why is it so? Calcutta High Court has so far had only one Chief Justice. Calcutta High Court was also founded in 1862. One Chief Justice, who was a lady, and two acting Chief Justices.